Hi, hi again, everyone. This is Tim along with Matt Emch as we bring you the football show here on RadioMVP.com, episode number 3. As we got a lot of football to talk to about this weekend. Big wrap up show in a lot of ways, Matt. You and I had 2 games, and this Thursday and Friday on Z104, and then a lot of high school football action, very important action as we get closer to the computer rankings and heading towards week 10, as we have, believe it or not, have been through 8 weeks of the high school football season. And then we got to get into the collegiate level where some great upsets happened this past weekend, and also the NFL. So let's talk about our games. Amazing. We had 2 uniquely different games. First, on Thursday night, we seen the Highland Tigers show their strength as they won 42-3.
Yeah, we've had the luck of seeing them 3 times this year, and to Coach Dom Menendez's happiness, every time we've done their game, they've won. Each time that we saw them play, they have, in my opinion, and I know you said you felt the same way, they have gotten better as a team. They have gelled more. They're playing as a much more cohesive unit. I think they are peaking at the right time, which is, right before the playoffs. They need to do that because next week, now this week, they have a huge game against undefeated Canfield, and that is the game of the year for them right now, and actually could be, make or break time for making the playoffs.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. I have to agree with what you were stating earlier. That we both stated. There's one of the teams that we can definitely look at that has improved each and every week. Like you said, the 3 times we've seen them, we've seen remarkable difference in the team and how they're playing. But they're 6-2. Well, they have the opportunity. They probably, we'll get into that a little bit later here as we get into it. But then our second game this week was really a terrific game. I mean, we've seen some good ones this year. This may be the best one we've seen the first 8 weeks of the season between Hubbard and Struthers, as Struthers come away with the victory, and a lot of ebbs and flows in this game. I can't wait to people hear the scoreboard show and hear the highlights from this show.
Yeah, it was really, for me, without a doubt, so far this year, my top game we've done. Of course, we've had some good games so far. The closest one to it was the JFK LeBray game, which went in overtime and was won in overtime basically the same way that this game was won, with 17 seconds left with an interception on a drive. So, a lot of heartbreak in the game. I think another reason this was bigger for me was because the teams, in my opinion, are both better than JFK and LeBray are. So we saw better athletes on the field. We saw better gameplay. It being at the point it is of the year where everyone's jockeying for playoff positions, they're playing even harder. Hubbard just, seemed to have an answer for everything Struthers did. And for Struthers to finally, come up big with that amazing goal line stand at the end of the game and finish off with that interception to ice it, as heartbreaking as it was for Hubbard and how bad I felt for those kids and the long ride they had ahead of them back to Hubbard. I was also just as excited for Struthers and their fans and players for, winning a game like that. I've been involved in some games like that in my lifetime, and, winning is amazing, but winning in a game like that where you're trading punches back and forth and you win on just an amazing play with no time left, there's nothing that feels better. So hats off to both teams, but Struthers, they're looking strong right now going into the playoff season.
Oh, there's no question. I thought they played really a thorough game. I mean, the only weakness we can talk about with Struthers that was glaring is the lack of a kicking game. in a sense for extra points or field goal situations, which they scored 3 touchdowns and ended up going for 2 each and every time, converting 1 out of the 3 opportunities on a 2-point conversion. Be the sticking thorn that they have to deal with as they move forward here, trying to get to the playoffs and then hopefully make a run into the playoffs.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Tim. I mean, when you're having the opportunity to go into the postseason and you do not have a kicking game to depend on, as well as I do, defenses get so much better in the playoffs. You're coming up against teams, either yours or someone else's, whose defense is going to end up being the tipping point for winning the state championship. And if you can't put it in the end zone, but you're in the red zone and you don't get anything out of it, you're going to end up coming short. And you lose once in the playoffs and it's one and done. So I don't know. We should have asked. I just thought, I would love to know what the situation is. If the kicker's hurt, if whatever, I would like to know in the future. But that could end up really being a huge hindrance for them when it gets tighter in the year.
One of the players that ended up being one of our MVPs for the game was Nick Adams, and what he brought to the Wildcats throughout the game. You can't teach speed, as the old saying goes, and you can't teach football all the time. You can teach football to a certain level, but some guys are just born to play and born to run.
Oh yeah, he is. I kept using the phrase lightning in a bottle. And unless people see clips of, the game, and you're going to have to give me the link to get to that. I want to see some of these highlights. He was a phenomenal football player. Davion Daniels, the quarterback for Hubbard, was absolutely phenomenal himself. Struthers really did not have an answer for him. They couldn't really stop him. He always seemed to get out of multiple tackles. He slipped a couple times, but got up and ended up getting something out of nothing. I actually thought, that he might score right at the end, unless their defense came up big, and they did. And that was, the one time that they really needed to step up and stop him. And fortunately for Struthers, they did. He was amazing. He would have been our player of the game if, Hubbard would have won. But Nick Adams was just lights out amazing. He's one of the best football players I've seen in a long time. I truly believe that he will be playing college football somewhere. I don't know what level, what offers he'll get, but he reminds me a lot of Dave Roberts, the great defensive back I played with at Youngstown State during the national championship years. And you remember, Tim, he was amazing.
He was lights out. Yeah. He could do it all. He played defensive back. I know he caught that big touchdown pass in the playoff game. I mean, he was Mr. Utility, and he did so much for the Penguins back in that day. You're right. He was and you're right. I think Adams has that potential to be that type of player for somebody at the next level. We'll see what his future holds about it. But more importantly, he has 2 more high school football games to play, and then hopefully a playoff run for the Wildcats. Speaking of the playoffs, let's take a look moving forward to the OHSAA Division I Region I playoff bracket. St. Ignatius leads that. Matter of fact, the first 7 teams have basically control their own control their own desire to get to the playoffs. 4 teams have clinched. St. Ignatius, Mentor, Canton, McKinley, and Euclid have clinched, and then you have the other 3 who are basically control their own destiny about what they're going to do next. And that only leaves 1 spot open, and Massillon Perry has it right now. And Austintown Fitch is 5-3 at number 10 with 11.93. They got to get to Perry, who is at 15.1. It's not looking good in Division I, Region I for the Falcons, who had a big win this week as they took on Erie McDowell from Pennsylvania and won 20-0.
Yeah, they had a really big win. You were curious about that because I believe you said a friend of yours calls their games.
Yeah. Matter of fact, he sent us highlights, and we're going to have that part of the scoreboard show. So we
Good.
have that for those who listen to our scoreboard show on RadioMVP.com. You want to check out week 8 is we're going to have featured 3 games, highlights from 3 games. We'll have the Austintown Fitch Down game. We have the Niles McKinley and, of course, Howland game from Thursday night. And we have Friday night's game between Hubbard and Struthers. So well, a lot of football highlights. I'm cutting it up as we speak and hope to have that out sometime here in the next couple of hours, hopefully.
Well, Tim, I think Fitch has. I think they have Boardman and possibly Ursuline left. Is that who they have left?
I believe you're right. Yeah. So it's
they need some help.
They do. Matter of fact, let me double check that since you brought it up. I can check it real quick.
If they could beat Boardman, Boardman has tallied up some decent points. So that
it's going to be a huge game for both teams. It is this week, Matt. Boardman versus they play Boardman then Cardinal Mooney.
Mooney.
They have Mooney on the 27th, and they have Boardman on this coming Friday. So they're going to need that victory against Boardman to have any chance. That Boardman's going to have to continue continue their winning ways to have a chance to continue on. Matter of fact, they moved up from 7 to 5 in Region 7 in Division 2 football in the state of Ohio. Walnut Ridge from Columbus controls their own destiny, along with Massillon, Washington. Boardman comes in at 5th, and let's see, at number 8 is Licking Heights, who one time shared that 7th spot with Boardman. So Boardman has moved up to number 5. If the playoffs began today, they would face Ashland in the first round of the playoffs. So the Spartans continue to move up. The Spartans now at 12.1098 average. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, if you're not familiar with Ohio high school football, is they use computer rankings in each division. Division 1, you get first level points for any victory you have during the season, and then you get second level points for any team you defeated and that team's schedule on the victories that they have. So you're rewarded for the strength of your opponent's schedules when you beat them. Any loss does not count towards the computer, only counting wins here. So losses do not affect the computer points, other than you get a 0 for that week, as you don't accumulate points. But if you do win, you'll accumulate level 1 points for sure. And if they have any wins on their schedule, you'll end up accumulating division or level 2 points. And there's level 3 points too, but that's really going, tie-breaking stuff.
Yeah, and you know what? Boardman is also another team like Howland who has really come on strong. They were undefeated until I believe week 4 when they met up with Steubenville, and they lost their star running back to a blown out ACL. He was, I guess, the best offensive weapon they had, and they went on a 3-game losing streak, but ever since then they have not looked back. We had them against Harding. That was a barn burner as well. They almost lost but came up big at the end to win, just almost exactly like they did against Ursuline last week, my alma mater, who looked like they were going to win the game, but our MVP of the Boardman Harding game, quarterback O'Hara from Boardman, drove them right down the field and tied it up. They went into overtime, and Ursuline blew a coverage, and Boardman took them out with a touchdown. And, Boardman is just, in my opinion, coming on at the right time, and they're looking strong. And if they could keep playing the way that they're playing now, they could, potentially make it deep into the playoffs.
Oh, there's no question. I like their situation right now, and we'll see how they react to it. Moving on to Region 9 and Division 3, Canfield maybe the best team in our area this year, Matt, who is 8-0, leads that region with a 23.1750 rating. And Buckeye from Medina is number 2. Alliance is 3. Talmadge is 4. Notre Dame Cathedral Latin is 5. East from Akron, and we were talking about them earlier. Akron East for I believe it was.
They've only lost one.
Who was. Yeah, who was on their schedule?
Howland has them week 10 at home.
Okay, that's what I thought. It was Howland. They're 7-1, and they sit at 6 here. And only other team is Howland, as we talked about them making a move. They are now at 13 with a 9.75. I'll be honest with you, it doesn't look good for the Tigers to make the playoffs this year. They're going to need that win against Akron. Have to win out and have some teams in front of them, maybe lose a few games where they don't accumulate any more points. And it's going to be very, very precarious for them. I'm not sure, looking at the standings right now at 13, that they can actually jump that many schools in front of them to get to the playoffs. Only 2 teams control their own destiny, and that is Canfield and Notre Dame Cathedral Latin. Else is basically alive, and we'll have to wait and see how it all turns out. But just looking at the standings and where they fall in right now, Howland at 5-3 is 13, and Chardon above them is at 11.78. So they're a full 2 points better than Howland in the computer standings.
You know what? It will be hard for them to make it. It's definitely not out of the realm of possibilities. If they could beat Canfield, which you said Canfield's number 1 right now.
Yeah. That'd be huge.
That'd be monstrous. And then, the wins, the secondary points from them. And then if they could beat Akron East, and like you said, with other teams
have to win out. Yeah, then
right,
need a little help.
Other teams lose and they jockey up in position, kind of like what's happened this past week, as we'll touch on in college. With like Penn State moving up to number 2, you got people dropping out of the top 5, and those other teams get the slots. So it's definitely there, but
they're not eliminated yet. So that's the good thing, and we'll just have to wait and see. But look, moving on to Region 13 and Division 4, our black and blue region here locally, where all our teams seem to be piled up. Steubenville has clinched a home game. They got the number 1 seed. They have a 25 rating. And number 2, they've clinched a playoff spot. Lakeview comes in at number 3, though, at 7-1 with a 15.75. Right now, they would have a home game, and Poland comes in at 7-1, who lost to Lakeview this week with a 14.6875, and Girard comes in at number 5 with an 11.8500, and all 3 of them control their own destiny, meaning if they can win out, they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, all of those teams are extremely impressive. I love the fact that how well represented our area is right now in the Tri-County area. All 3 of those schools, Lakeview just coming off that monstrous win over Poland. Poland's still definitely one of the best teams. Liberty we've seen twice, and we'll get to see them in the last week of the season against their backyard rival, Girard, who is also considered one of the top 3 teams in the area, still undefeated. Liberty is coming on at the right time for themselves too, so we could definitely possibly get a state champion out of that division this year. And I am curious, Tim, is Lakeview and Canfield going to be playing in one of the last weeks?
They played last week, this past week. Lakeview defeated Poland 35-30.
No, I said Canfield.
Canfield. I'm sorry. Let me find out here. I believe Lakeview does not have them on the schedule. Poland.
That'd be a nice playoff game if they.
Poland has Canfield on week 10.
Wow, that's a big game.
It's huge for both teams. It's going to be, again, that's why I call this the black and blue region. It has just about everybody. As I mentioned, Girard, Poland, and Lakeview all control their own destiny. If they can win out, they're going to make the playoffs. Struthers comes in at number 6. You and I got to see this past week. They have 11.65 rating, and Canton South comes in at 7, and Cardinal Mooney comes in at number 8.
Yeah, that win that they got over Harding, they had, Harding just, I feel terrible for those kids. They've had so many close games this year that they've come up on the raw end. Against Boardman, they lost at the very end. They just can't seem to finish. Against Boardman, they lost. Mooney, they looked like they had a win. They literally were a minute away to win, and they lost. And the same thing happened with them against Ursuline as well. All 3 of those games, they just could not finish the fourth quarter. And it's a 4-quarter war. If you don't play all the quarters as hard as you can, you will lose. A la my Youngstown State team in 1992's national championship. We went at halftime 28-0. We tied it up, lost with a field goal with hardly any time on the clock. We didn't deserve the win. We didn't play 4 quarters. So same thing with Harding and Mooney. You say controlling your destiny. That team controls it. If they can beat Ursuline in the Holy War this week, and then with Fitch the last game of the year, they definitely will make it, in my opinion.
Oh, there's no question. They definitely control their own destiny, not mathematically, because there's still other teams available who have opportunities, but right. I agree with you. They are in position. The Holy War this week between Ursuline and Mooney here in Youngstown is the matchup of the week. To be a terrific game because of the rivalry. I know Ursuline's only won 2 games this year, but Ursuline's been competitive in so many games. They just not had the ball bounce their way like they did against Thursday night against Boardman, where Boardman was able to, get to second overtime and win it when they, like you mentioned earlier, a busted coverage, and, O'Hara found Forte in the end zone to win the ball game for Boardman. So we know Ursuline can play football. It's just this year the ball just has not bounced their way. However, as you mentioned many times before, and I'm sure you'll mention it right now, all will be forgiven if they can beat the Cardinal Mooney Cardinals this week.
Yeah, as tough as a season it's been, let's not forget Ursuline has one of the top 5 most difficult schedules in the entire state of Ohio. They do not play cream puffs. Week in, week out, they're playing teams who are ranked either in the top 5 or top 8 teams in the state. Majority of them are in the top 5. So they have had a gauntlet of teams that are amazing football teams this year. Akron, Hoban, Massillon. Good night, baby. They're going to play Akron St. V's the final week of the year. So, yes, it's an aberration this year for them to only have won 2 games. Some of them were uncharacteristically, out of their hands. They were not close, but they've got great players. And, when you have this huge rivalry, you throw records out the window. You really do. And Ursuline kids are going to be hungry for a win. This could have many different ramifications for them, not just like you said, having a rough year. If you can beat Mooney being at Ursuline or vice versa, that makes up for quite a bit. But, they could also, with a win over Moody, not only beat their hated rival, but possibly knock them out of the playoffs. So double whammy for them this week, and I wish them the best of luck.
Looking now, moving on to Division 5, Region 17. This is South Ranges region, who's 8-0, leading with an 18.975 computer average. Their next closest on the computer average is Sullivan Black River, who is 12.72. So they got a full 6-point lead in the computer rankings, and they have clinched their playoff spot. The number 2 through 6 all have control their own destiny, meaning if they can win out, they will make the playoffs. And the only other team on the verge of a playoff spot who needs to win out is LeBray. LeBray is at a 6.25. They have Girard, undefeated Girard, this Friday night. And then they have Jefferson Area, who's only won one game in Week 10. So their playoff hopes are going to come down to this week. They're going to need a victory against Girard because Jefferson Area may get a win this week, but it's not going to be enough in Week 10 to overcome anybody ahead of them to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and they just took a bad beating from Hubbard last week. So, they started out very strong, but they definitely got to get some help and finish strong. And, man, going back to South Range, everyone who's from this area knows year in and year out, they put out excellent product on the field. They have a great coaching staff. The head coach has been there, I don't even know how many years, but he has done phenomenal. They've made the playoffs almost every year for, 10 years. The only knock on South Range is that for some reason they start so strong and then in the playoffs they have trouble finishing out. This year feels a little different for me. They got their new digs, their new stadium, which – in a new uniform. And, Tim, how young guys are. When you get things like that, that invigorates a program, and just having that new stadium makes you play so much better. You're so proud to call that home, so you defend your house, and this could be the year, the tipping point for them. And man, they're really looking really strong, as you put it when you said how many points separate them from number 2. So they're looking good.
Moving on in the OH Division 6 region, here's the region that matters to us this week, Matt, as our game is the McDonald Blue Devils hosting the Western Reserve Blue Devils, and it should be a lot of fun. A lot of Blue Devils on the field, and this is a must-win for McDonald. Lose, not make the playoffs. Win, have an opportunity to make the playoffs. And if you're Western Reserve, win, you probably control your own destiny to make the playoffs in Week 10.
Yeah, and 2 good football programs, 2 proud football programs. For so many years, whenever I heard reserve, I did not think of strong football teams. They used to really struggle. Well, now they've had a good coaching staff, a stable head coach for many years now, and they've done really well. They almost won state a couple years ago and just came up short. And, they definitely had a couple losses this year that they should have, some people thought they might win, but they've pretty much done mostly well the whole season. McDonald, I believe, only has lost 1 game, and, they're coached so well as well. They play.
It's been a great game Friday night.
Yeah, they play well, and they usually make the playoffs. But as you said, they're in that position where unless they win this week, it would be really difficult for them to make it. So I'm looking forward to it because with so much on the line, you're going to see a lot of good football play and great hitting.
Well, here's an interesting thing. I mean, I was just looking at the Western Reserve Blue Devils schedule. Their losses comes to South Range, which is not a big surprise. South Range is 8-0, and that came in week number 2 of the season. And their other loss came to Springfield. Springfield's 5-3 this year, and they lost 40-14 2 weeks ago to them. That was a kind of a surprise. Maybe not a surprise that they lost, but how bad they lost that game. It just was not their night a couple Fridays ago. And it's going to be a huge game in McDonald as Western Reserve comes in at, let's see, let me double check here, number 5 on the computer rankings in this. And McDonald comes in outside looking in at number 9. So the winner of this game most likely has an inside track to making the playoffs. That is how important it is. I'm not sure Western Reserve could survive if they don't win and then win week 10. It will be really close to see what if they make it or not. If they lose to McDonald, McDonald must win. in the same vein as West Reserve. This is a must win. This is their rival game. This is what they, these two schools wait for all season to play. You mentioned, how Ursuline, if you win this game against Mooney, all sins are forgiven. Well, same scenario here for these two smaller schools. And it's going to be a big, important game for both Blue Devils, as we have the McDonald Blue Devils and the West Reserve Blue Devils.
Yeah, it's funny how you get the same mascots with big games involved. Last week, it was the matchup of the Bulldogs with Lakeview and Poland. And like you just said, we got the Blue Devils this week. So, like I just said, with so much on the line, Tim, I think we're going to get most likely another good game this week. So I'm really looking forward to Friday.
All right. And just a reminder, you can catch us on the radio at Z104 here in the Valley and around the world at oldies, z104.com. That is word oldies with Z104 at the end.com. Just click on the listen live and you'll hear Matt and I next Friday night. Pregame starts at 6:30 and kickoff is at 7. And why I'm thinking about it, Matt, let me go one more division here. And this is Division 7, Region 25. And this is the JFK region. And also Valley Christian, two local teams that have a chance to make the playoffs still. Believe it or not, JFK is ranked number 7 in the region with a 5.6269 record, or a computer ranking, and they have a 3-5 overall record. They can finish 5-5 and make the playoffs if they can win out.
Yeah, that's because they have a good schedule that they play. The wins that they've had this year were quality wins, and the teams they've beaten have been winning games that obviously give them that good secondary point. They're very well coached, and we both know, they're a little bit down, but part of what happens when you have a state champion, a defending state champion, is you get the best from every team you play week in and week out. They play on a different level. Because you have a target on your chest because you were the state champion. Everybody wants to beat you. Well, if they make it to the playoffs and they get in that Division 7, they could really make a run. And who knows? I mean, they could possibly, win a second state championship. So, good luck to Jeff Bayek and his staff.
Well, there's no doubt they're going to be rooting. I know the Eagles from JFK will be rooting for Champion to get a victory, LeBray to get a victory, and Crestview to get a victory, as that will add to their second level points. Those are the only 3 victories they have, and those are the only schools that really matter if they go out and win in week 9 and 10. JFK faces Villa Angela St. Joe's and then the following Friday they got St. Thomas Aquinas. So they do have their work cut out for them. Just above them, though, before we get to Valley Christian, is a team from Trumbull County that we don't talk about. And you and I, probably honest, I know of them. I don't know much about them. I've only been there a few times in my career covering high school football. But the Wyndham Bombers come in of 6-2 and are currently number 6 in the region. And the Bombers this week, let me tell you in a second here, they take on Shocker from Cleveland, and they got Pine-Tuny Valley to end the season. Both those two teams are 2-6. So the Bombers are going to have a chance to be maybe a surprise team to make the playoffs this year in Trumbull County.
Yeah, and, just like you said, and I mean no disrespect, I really know nothing about Wyndham. It's about a half an hour from here. The one thing I do know about it, ironically enough, is my wife Stacy teaches baton. She has her dance studio, Shining Stars Dance Baton, and she has a twirler from Wyndham High School. So ironically enough, that's how I know about them and where they are. And she had been telling my wife that their team is actually doing okay this year. So, I would like to see any team from this area, regardless if they're farther and we're not familiar with them, do well and represent us in the playoff system.
Yeah, there's no question. There's one other team to talk about, and that is from Youngstown, Valley Christian School, the Eagles, they currently could make the playoffs if they went out. They have a tough road, though. They got Mogador this week, who's number one in their region in Division 6, Region 21. And they have Crestview, who's 1-5, who's not played a lot of games, is their final game of the season. So it's going to be an uphill battle for them, but they definitely have a chance. They're 4-4 in the region, and just surprise a few people and slip into this playoff picture, especially if they can get the win this week. A tough road, but maybe it's possible that they could get the victory and continue on this season.
Yeah, I've been proud actually of Valley Christian this year. They've been struggling for quite a while, and they've had some signature wins this year. They're doing okay. It seems like maybe they're improving each year, and I hope that they can get better and better because they get talent in that area. So I'm happy to see that. And, you know, as you said, the huge game against Mogador, if some way they could win that, that'd be monstrous. And then having a team in Crestview who quite usually has the opposite kind of record. So they're extremely in low spirits right now. They're struggling so badly. I did not know how bad they were until you told me right now. But, you know, that's a possible win for them. But you can never take each game lightly. Each team will play up to their best ability, especially when it's the last game of the year. And, you know, I want to say real quick, Niles McKinley High School is having a very difficult season. They're winless right now. But as you and I were talked about Thursday night when they were playing Howland, they have 2 games left. And the 2 games that they have, each team has only won 1 game this year. So it is very possible that those kids at Niles could possibly not get 1, but maybe 2 wins to finish out the season. And how important that would be for those kids to get to feel what it's like to win and send those seniors out on a positive note and bring all those young kids, which comprises of basically 90% of the team, back into the following year, you know, on a high note and ready to, you know, turn things around. So just a little shout out of good luck to the Red Dragons.
No question about it. Love seeing teams get off the snide and actually, like you said, move forward and have some momentum. And you know what? It's a proud community, Niles, who's watched a lot of football in their days, and they won a state championship back in the 60s. And you know what? It is a big, important part of that community. And let's hope the best, not just for the kids, but for everybody involved, because it's tough when things just don't go your way. And like you said, they got a couple weeks left, and they have 2 really legitimate opportunities to get on the win column. And let's hope that happens. If you look at, we turn the page down to the NCAA, Matt, as Division I. The big upset this week came Thursday night as Syracuse came away with a 3-point win over Clemson, number 2 ranked team in the country, 27-24.
Yeah, you know, we talked about that game the other night, and I was just absolutely blown away that Syracuse knocked them off. And, you know, that shows you that you can never take teams for granted. You've got to play every game, you know, like it is a national championship. And everybody, again, here you are, Clemson Tigers, number 2 ranked team in the nation. Some saying they should be number 1 before this. Their quarterback playing basically the same way as
Watson did, yeah.
Watson was last year. They weren't missing a beat, and I think he was actually injured going into it, and then he got even more hurt in the game. So a huge win for Syracuse. People were shocked. The nation was shocked. Yeah, it was 27-24, but a loss is a loss, and you know, Syracuse did not have any ranking at all. And then right after that game, the next night, Cal not only beats number 8 Washington State, who I thought was without a doubt probably the best team in the Pac-10. They beat them 37-3 and just throttled them. And I have to admit, I did not see that one coming. I was shocked. I'm sure everybody was shocked at that one too. Two huge losses, and also I believe
jinx there, I guess, for Clemson and Washington State.
And then I'm looking for the score right now, Tim. Did Washington win or lose? They were losing when I was watching it the other night.
Washington lost to Arizona State.
There you go.
13-7. Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching that.
Number 5 that went down. Yeah.
Yeah, number 5. So that's part of the reason why Penn State has moved into the number 2 spot. Everyone's loss is your gain, and they definitely are a team that looks so strong right now. Some people are saying I don't think anybody can compete with Alabama. I disagree. I think there are teams that can compete. No one gave Ohio State a chance against them in 2015 when we won the national championship, and not only beat Alabama, but very well kicked their butts in that game. And I was really blown away by how well they came back and played. So don't sleep on Penn State. Don't sleep on Wisconsin, who was under the radar and strong. The Big Ten has definitely got some good teams coming on strong at the right time.
I agree. It should be a lot of fun to watch as this continues. I was just, as you mentioned, there was these upsets this week over there. Of course, Alabama won, which is not a big surprise. Georgia won. These are games I think were most people expected. Wisconsin defeated Purdue, who is playing pretty good football this year. I know they're 3-3, but Purdue has really improved their program this season, and that was a tough-notch game as the Wisconsin, got out to the 17 points in the first half and hung on to win that game. 17-9 in the Big Ten. So that was a big win there for Wisconsin, who's now 6-0 on the season.
Yeah, we were talking, you and I and Anthony at dinner after the game Friday night. We talked about teams under the radar, and I said, Wisconsin, people better watch out. They're sneaking up on everybody, and everyone's talking Penn State, and Ohio State's looking so strong. They had a monster win against Nebraska. JT Barrett, I think, had 7 touchdowns. He seems like he is just getting better and better week in and week out. But, another program that is starting to really do better over the years is Indiana. And they, a year or two ago, came down to, I think it was 2 or 3 overtimes with Michigan and came up on the short end of the stick. And they only lost 27-20 to Michigan the other day. And, Michigan, in my opinion, they've got the number 1 ranked defense in the nation. I'm not just saying this because I'm an Ohio State guy. I just think Michigan is overrated. I think Ohio State and Penn State are gonna take care of business with them. I think the Big Ten is gonna come down to Wisconsin, Penn State, and Ohio State this year.
The team that may have the glass slipper this year, the Cinderella story, who's making that comeback, who'll be ranked back in the top 10 this week, is the University of Miami, coming away with a big victory again at the last moment.
Yeah.
As they came away with the win over Georgia Tech. Just a phenomenal game back and forth between those two schools. I enjoyed that one the most this weekend. I thought it was a great game, and I'm excited as a football fan and college football fan to see Miami back in the conversation.
Me too, Tim. And you know what? I've always been a big Mark Richt fan. Him and his wife, my wife and I connected with him because, like my wife Stacy and I adopted. Mark Richt and his wife adopted as well. So we got a connection through that. But I've always had a immense respect for his football knowledge. The guy year in and year out, like Bo Pelini at Nebraska had 9-3, 10-2 seasons, but it wasn't good
He's
enough.
always winning.
Right, and they got rid of him. Well, he went to his alma mater where he played football, the U, Miami, and immediately they are playing lights out football. They are definitely one of the best ACC teams, and right now they might be the best. So they're playing great, and I'm happy to see it because my Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who I will see not this week but the following week at South Bend, play another team that I said everybody better watch out for, is a sleeping giant in North Carolina State, who is playing phenomenal football right now, and the ACC might come down to those two teams, Miami and North Carolina State. North Carolina State has probably the best defensive line in the country. Their lineman Chubbs, who is the actual cousin of the amazing running back from Georgia, Chubbs. They're playing great football. Their defensive backfield is just ridiculous. So I'll get to see them play Notre Dame in a great game. And, when Notre Dame and Miami are doing well, they used to call that, they had the Catholics versus the convicts back in the early 90s, and what a great series that was. So I'd like to see that get rekindled.
Oh, there's no question. I think it should be a lot of interesting matchups potentially coming forward. But I agree with you about North Carolina State just playing terrific football. They're 6-1 now. They beat Pittsburgh, is now 2-5. I mean, it wasn't even a close game, 35-17. Mark Richt is done with Miami. He's brought that chip back to their shoulder, and they have that swagger back in Miami. Miami needs that swagger. I mean, you expect Miami to have that swagger, and you know what? Maybe the ball bounced their way on that one play down the late in the ball game where he hit the receiver off his underthrew him, and he kind of popped it up and went off his helmet and came down with it, to help get with the field goal at the end of the game. But you know what? Some teams just have that destiny feel, and they'll come up with the big play that you don't always expect. I think Michigan State a few years ago had that feel. They just had that ability to win games when you least expected it, like when they played Michigan with a punt. What absolutely where you never expected. The snap and everything will go crazy, and next thing you know is the last play of the game, and it falls into the end zone for the touchdown. It was most amazing ending of a game. I'll always remember that one.
Yeah.
It was a miracle win. But you know what? That's college football. That's what makes it fun, is you want to see those type of teams. And, I mentioned it last week, and I'll mention it again this week. I think, the Penn State, interesting matchup coming up here against Ohio State. That's going to be a top 10, matchup when it comes about. And it is season on the line for both teams, just kind of like last year. As Penn State went under the radar all season long and maybe even got overlooked, in the playoffs, where Ohio State went to the playoffs and they didn't, though they won the Big Ten. This year, you can see that chip on their shoulder. They have something to prove. They want to prove to not just to the world, but to everybody in college football that, Penn State's back.
Yeah, that school has gone through a lot since the scandal with Sandusky and Joe Pa, and how horrible some of those things that occurred at that school. But, it's nice to see that it didn't take them decades to get back to prominence, and they're playing well. And that's going to be a monster game. Some people said they should have made the playoffs, and you can argue that with how bad Clemson beat Ohio State, but Clemson won the national championship. And, Penn State, I was upset about it. I watched the game. They should have won the Rose Bowl, and they blew it against USC. But going back to like what you were saying, Tim, about like Miami with how they got that pass, and it's kind of like Michigan State, Michigan with the punt, and looking at how exciting those ended, and going back to when Cordell Stewart threw the pass against Michigan to win that game, the Hail Mary. Luck sometimes is, because of great preparation, and you just finish out in amazing ways. So there's teams that are just playing lights out, and college football really is that magic kind of, plus of high school. It's just still got the pageantry, the bands, the smells. Everything is so great about it that, in my opinion, you lose in the pros. But, it's a great thing. And I have to mention real quick, another game that really blew me away was 2 games, was the Oklahoma-Texas Red Rivalry game. Was
right.
Really a great football game. Tom Herman's doing wonderful there. I think Texas is definitely on their way back to becoming a power. And then I was actually a little surprised, but not to a high point, because it's a good school program and has history. LSU knocked off Auburn as well in a 27-23 matchup. And, Auburn definitely has one of the best teams in the country right now. But LSU, I think, their backs were against the wall. Ed Ogeron, people were calling for his head already, that he should be fired, and their team stepped up and they had his back. And what a better way to make a statement than to knock off Auburn, which some were saying might be the second best team in the SEC right now.
And real quickly, just because it matters to both of us and to our friend Anthony, our Penguins fell in overtime Saturday night. It was a winnable game. Unfortunately, things didn't go their way in overtime. And you know what? This team's lost a lot of close games this year. And it's going to be a character builder. You're going to find out what they're made of the rest of the season, because I think each coach and member of that program got to be thinking that truth of the matter is, if they played every down the way they hoped to play, they probably could be undefeated right now. And that's not a stretch.
Yeah, I was heartbroken to see the way that game ended. I was supposed to go to the game. They honored my 92 team there at halftime with the 97 national championship team. I didn't make it because you had mentioned, when I talked, I have a foot issue, and I watched the game from home. And when I saw that they were tied, I had stepped away for a little bit, and they were tied, and they lost it, especially when Coach Pelini called that timeout and the kid missed the field goal.
I know. I felt terrible.
Oh my God, I was sick.
I know. I said the same thing. I go, that just gives him like that mulligan that everybody hopes.
I knew when the kid would make the second one too. You knew he was going to make it. And they, like you said, they've played great, Tim. I mean, they should have beat Pitt. They barely lost to South Dakota. If they would have beat South Dakota, game day would have been in Youngstown for that North Dakota State game. And they just came up on the raw end. And you know what, though? Last year they had some losses like this, and they turned it on at the right time, and they went to the national championship. So like you just said, it's a character builder, and if they handle this the right way, they could end up going back in this year winning.
I agree with you, because, I mean, one of the things that I'm most impressed with the YSU Penguins this year is Mays. I mean, he's the backup quarterback, and he's come into a scenario, and he has performed well, and he's led this team. And, yeah, they've come up a little short in the last 2 weeks, but – that depth, that quarterback, we seen it last year going into the playoffs, how important it was. And, now they're talking that Wells will be back here next week. So it's just the depth that they have, and they're going to need both of them the rest of the season. There's no question in my mind how important both Wells and Mays is going to be to the Penguins' success as they move forward.
Yeah, I hope that, you have a situation right now that's kind of shaky, Tim, because Wells is playing so well, and then if you put Mays is playing so well, and you put Wells back in, could it mess up how well they're playing together? So that's going to be interesting to see. They also have Northern Iowa next, I believe, who has really been a thorn in the side of the Penguins for many years. They have traded with them, but I believe the overall record, the Northern Iowa team has it up on them in all time. So this would be a monster win for them to, bounce back after last week's heartbreaking loss and beating a huge rival of theirs.
There's no question. Let's move on to the NFL, and let me get this off my chest. In fantasy football, if you're familiar with it, there's a theory when you go to the draft board and you do your draft to have what they call zero running backs, meaning that running backs are devalued in the NFL. You can find one later. You don't have to use a first or second round pick in fantasy football to find your running back who will do very well for you all season long, and you'll find them in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can load up then on that position. Well, the Cleveland Browns got to get over the theory that zero quarterbacks works in the NFL. 3 quarterbacks on that team, and not one of them, as this moment speaks, is an NFL quarterback. Kaiser's too young, and this was my biggest concern about him. I understand he's probably the most talented one that you have. Hogan probably can play in the NFL, and it will be a quality backup most of his career, but I don't see him as the future of the Cleveland Browns. And Kaiser, Kessler is what he is. That's why he's not dressed this year. He didn't win a game last year. He doesn't have the arm strength for the NFL. You just can't win. You can't be competitive in ball games without a quarterback in the NFL. Zero quarterbacks just doesn't work. Kaiser long-term may prove to be a quality quarterback, but with very little receivers around him, an offensive line that's still gelling, running backs who are 1/3 of the NFL starting running backs, it's difficult to win ball games. I don't care who's behind center or who's taking the snap and shotgun. You can't do it without experience. And, when they did win, they've had some experience at quarterback. I'm not saying they won a lot of games, but when they did, they had some experience. And team's going to move forward without finding somebody off the heap who could come in and at least be a backup and help Kaiser learn the game and possibly play a few games in front of him where he can learn. The only guy available is Kaepernick, and it's absolutely insanity that guy can't find a job and the Browns don't have a quarterback.
Yeah, I feel bad for the Browns right now. You don't have a quarterback that has ever won an NFL game right now at the moment. And like you said, if you don't have a guy at backup who can at least help Kaiser along to learn what it is to be a pro quarterback, he is not getting that just priceless information that the majority of these young guys do. And so as he moves on, he's going to be behind where you normally would be at other franchises. I feel really bad for the Browns right now. They came up against one of the better teams today in the Texans, who lost J.J. Watt a week ago. Monstrous loss for them. But, I was watching my Steelers today, and I saw what happened to you guys, and I just, felt really, really horrible for you. And I just keep waiting for that week to come where I'm going to be, oh, wow, the Browns finally got their first win of the regular season. You guys did so well in the preseason. I really thought everything was going to be different than it is right now. So it's still a lot of football left to be played. I just hope things can at least be salvaged a little bit for you.
I do want to say one more thing about the Browns besides what I said about the quarterbacks. And this is, I think, the scenario they're in. They have Hugh Jackson, a head coach. I'm not saying change coaches. They've done it so often, you just can't do it. However, I think he at times acts like he's too smart for the NFL, that I'm going to outsmart every defensive coordinator out there. And that's a wonderful theory in life as an offensive coach. But you don't have the horses right now. You don't have the players.
Yeah.
So you gotta roll it back to, if that's your A-level game, and I have no problem with it if you have A players around you, but you don't. You probably got, B's and C's right now. You need to draw it back, and on 3rd down and 2, you don't throw a 35-yard pass downfield. You're going to have to run it with your running back and hope that he gets those 2 yards, and your offensive line can move someone off the scrimmage to get it. You got to play smash mouth sometimes to win football games, and quite honest with you, to milk the clock and shorten the game a little bit for you. Your defense can get some breaks. They're on the field way too much. It's a frustrating thing to watch week in and week out. Hugh Jackson's been the head coach now for 1 year and 6 games, and I had high expectations for him because I loved what he did as an offensive coach. I like what he did as the 1 year in Oakland as a head coach. I just think right now he needs to recognize the talent that he's working with. And I hate to say it, you gotta reel it in a little bit. You cannot be what you want to be right now because you just don't have the horses, the players to pull it off. He just doesn't have it. The receiving corps is just not that good. The offensive line has, so I think is the best part of the Browns. So you have to use it and run the ball. You may not have the best running backs, but you're going to have to find a way to get those 3 to 5 yard runs, and especially on 3rd down, and do something about it. I look at it, I just shake my head. To me, it's common sense, and I don't see it out of him, and it's frustrating me because he needs to grow as a head coach too. The Browns, as players, have to get better, but the coaching staff has to get better along with them.
Yeah, I absolutely, Tim. I mean, last year the Browns had a decent running game and they played good running defense. So they need to get away from always pitching that ball as far as they can down the field. Don't yam it, just run it. You got, like you said, a good offensive line. The way they got to look at things right now, as you're saying over and over, is when you got BC talent, you can't run that kind of offense that you have, that's for a, sports car, let's say. Right. You got to bring it down to another level, and you look at it through the eyes of a high school coach who has, okay, this is the group of boys I got this year. They're not the biggest, the strongest, or the fastest. So what can I do with what I got and do the best with that talent? I'm going to have to change it to this. And that's all he really needs to do. He's overthinking it, like you said. He's just, I'm so smart, I'm going to try and figure out. Well, no, just go back to basics. Try and just play regular smash mouth football. And I think things will turn out better for them in the long run for the rest of the season. You just, like you said, man, they just don't have the guys to do what he's trying to accomplish at the moment. So I hope, he realizes that for, not just the players' sake, but for the fans' sake. And they deserve to know what it's like to win some games.
I'll tell you what, my hat's off to the New York Jets. They gave New England everything they could today. I'm not a big Jets fan at all, never have been, never will be, but that team has played better than their record, and they continue to surprise people each and every week. I think there's just a situation what we're talking about. The talent rose to the occasion for New England, and they, came back and won that game 24-17. But, that first half, I thought the Jets just played, out of their minds. Late in the first half, they got that touchdown pass to Gronk to tie the game up. But I tell you what, the New York Jets, to me, is a team that is trending in the right direction. They may not be winning every game, but they're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, and, the city of New York is struggling right now. New York, New Jersey, with what's happening with the Giants. And it's good to see the Jets, who have really been a doormat for the last 5 years, are playing well. And they definitely had their opportunities to beat the Patriots today. They just, came up shy against one of the elite teams. And, I think the Patriots, everyone knows they're not the team that they were last year either. So, I think, like you just said, you called it perfectly. They're trending in the right way, and they played pretty well. And there were some good games today. Aside from that, I'll save my Steeler game till the end, but
That's what I was hoping to do.
I was really impressed today with the Vikings winning 23-10 over their rival, the Packers. I was really very enthused about how well their defense played, shutting down Aaron Rodgers, and their offense looked strong. And wow, what a signature win for them to beat their hated rivals.
I agree, and that's what you want to see. In the NFL, you want to be able to beat teams that you need to beat. Divisional rivals and stuff like that. It's just that's what it's all about. And if you can't do that, then you unfortunately you become like the Cleveland Browns. Swimming. How long can you tread water? Unfortunately, the Browns don't tread water. Okay, I'll get off them. Too easy to hit. Miami Dolphins, though, got to give credit to the Miami Dolphins. It's another team, I think, kind of up and down, but the last 2 weeks played a lot better. Last week, their defense really won the game for them. Today, I think it was a total team effort. Their defense came through again as they defeated, a team in Atlanta who, last couple of years has been a high-powered offense. They held them to only 17 points.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very big win. They need it as a franchise. Those people in Miami are huge fans of their team. They support them well, even when they're bad. And it's nice to see these teams that struggle starting to do better. Right now, as of today, the Dolphins are 3-2, just like the Falcons are, who, like you said, I mean, they're one of the better teams in the NFL. They were in the Super Bowl last year. My opinion, should have won the Super Bowl. I'm not going to go over that one. I feel like there was some funny business going on in that game. But, Dolphins are playing well. And a shocker to me, I didn't expect, was the Saints and the Lions, where the Saints have been playing really well. They came in at 3-2. And the Saints came in at 2-2, and the Saints beat them 52-38. So that was really a good football game and a shocker. Shows you, man, the NFL, there's parity, man. You got professional football players on each team, and these guys know what it's like to win and what it takes to beat. And any given Sunday, that's where that phrase comes from. Somebody will knock off ones you don't expect.
Most NFL games come down to with a 7-point margin, and you can see it in the scores today. There are a few that are, got into shootout like New Orleans did with Detroit. 52 points is just ridiculous. You don't see that very often in the NFL, and but that's New Orleans. Drew Brees, when he's on, it's tough to really do anything about it. He can put points up, I think, in his sleep when he's really quarterbacking at his level. And, I tell you, another team that I thought got a huge win this week after trending the wrong way the last few weeks. They made the big trade this week, picking up Adrian Peterson. And look what Arizona did to Tampa Bay. They won 38-33. Yeah. And Adrian Peterson looked like the player that he was 3 years ago. I think he rushed for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns and was that back they missed since Johnson went down with the injury.
Yeah, their team is set up for a running back like him, which is why they made the trade. And New Orleans lost him. The big loss for them is their game. Drew Brees, like you just said, when he's on, he's on. Ever since he was at Purdue, he was something else. But I love seeing Adrian Peterson do well. I've been a big fan of his ever since the Oklahoma days. And, he's had a couple knee injuries and bounced back, and he's still a boss in the NFL and showing that his years are not over. And seeing him do that today against, in my opinion, a good Buccaneers team who is definitely trending in the right direction as well as becoming a better program. They should have beaten the Patriots last week, and they just came up short on that. So I was impressed with that. And then one of my favorite games of the day was the rival game between the LA Chargers and the Raiders. And the Chargers came up on top 17-16 in a barn burner. So you got both of those teams 2-4 right now, and who knows which way they'll go.
I agree. Yeah, it's a big win for the Chargers, and hopefully they'll be able to build on it. All right, just real quick shout outs to the Bears coming away an overtime victory against Baltimore. That's good for anybody who's an AFC North fan like we are. And
Bears are playing good football right now.
They are. And the Washington Redskins coming away with a 2-point win against San Francisco. That was an important win for that club too. But most importantly, let's get to your Pittsburgh Steelers. What a game. They led throughout the game, and I thought, Roethlisberger played probably his best game in about a month, to be quite honest with you. And he didn't do anything fantastic, but he didn't do anything terrible. I think that was the most important thing.
I was so relieved and so happy to see my Steelers playing Steeler football today. You and I and Anthony were talking Friday night at dinner after the game, and I said that you guys asked who Pittsburgh has, and I said we have the Chiefs at Kansas City. And I said, I'm happy about that because we have never lost a game at Arrowhead Stadium. We always play well there. Nobody else does, but Pittsburgh does. And we knocked off an undefeated 5-0 Kansas City Chief team today. And, when everybody's been saying Ben's lost it, Le'Veon, he was so ridiculous in the preseason, which he was. He was on fire today. He was running beautiful. The offensive line blocked well. Defense looked great, and I was happy. The defensive backs looked good. Finally, they were making nice picks, stops, breaking up passes. So it was the Steelers of old, and we really needed that win, and Ben needed the confidence to win that game.
No, I think winning on the road for him and putting some of his critics to bed in a sense that he can't do it on the road anymore. And that's been the biggest criticism for him is, in Pittsburgh, he's a all-star quarterback, but on the road, he's below average. And, I thought he was a manager today. I think he made the passes when he had to. I think they relied on Bell perfectly today. And you should. I mean, he's a horse. You gotta give the ball to him. He should be the focus. Yeah, and he should be the focus of the offense. And when you have a focus like that, that only opens up an Antonio Brown or a Bryant or whoever else that he's throwing to.
How about that catch Brown made today?
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. But I don't think that happens without the play from Bell.
No, it doesn't. He sets up everything else. So with him missing when he was not showing up and not, he was rusty when he came back, that throws everything off. Like I always like to say, a football team is like a fine-tuned machine. When you have one of those players not playing well or rusty or taken out, it's like taking a cog or a gear right out of that engine or it's broken and it messes the whole system up. And that's what was going wrong. And everybody was there today. Everybody played great. And like I said, they really needed it. And I'm very happy with that win. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they play. Just mentioning real quick, Tim, I just looked down at my phone. I have a live ticker going on. Shockingly, the Giants are up 20-3 in the third quarter over the Broncos.
I was just going to mention that myself. It's crazy, isn't it? I think our friend Anthony's having a tough weekend.
Yeah, I feel bad for the Indians lost, Browns lost, YSU lost. Or he's a Steeler fan, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a Bronco fan.
That Broncos. That's right. You just said it. I'm sorry, it went over my head. Yeah, he's a monster Broncos fan. He probably thought, man, we got this 0-5 Giants. Yeah. But hey, it's the pros. Yeah, so
anything can happen.
Yeah.
Real quick, Matt, before we sign off, I just want to remind everybody who may be listening to this now and may listen to it later on the podcast. You can find it on radiomvp.com. But Matt has a radio show from 6 to 7 on WBBW 1240 locally, and you can find it on their app, the 1240 Sports Radio app. It'll be live on Tuesday nights from 6 to 7. And check in, and he'll be talking just football with Matt Emch.
Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate that. Yeah, I always look forward every week to getting to that hour. It's something that doesn't get done often. We get to focus on, what means the most in the Tri-County area and the Steel Valley, and that's first high school football, which is God here. Second, college, and we spend a lot of time on those two. And we always finish up with a little pro, enough at least to important, happenings of the weekend and mention the Steelers and the Browns. So, listen on in at 6 p.m. on 1240, like Tim said. And I'll also be on from 3 to 6 Tuesday with Mark Means and AJ. So, listen on in and let us know how we're doing, and call in if you want, and we'll give the number out during the show. Thank you.
And one last reminder, if you download this through iTunes, please go to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review RadioMVP.com. We need all the ratings and reviews we can get. The more ratings and reviews we get, the higher we go up in the rankings and easier for others to find us. Very important as we try to grow this. If you have family and friends out there and they're sports fans, recommend our podcasts, as we have the sports podcast, the Scoreboard Show, and the football show that we do each week with Matt. So take advantage of Radio MVP. Stay informed in your sports and have a lot of fun with us each and every week in each podcast that we bring here on Radio MVP. Again, on iTunes, if you can rate it, review, and subscribe, it'd be greatly appreciative. Matt, thanks again for the evening. I enjoyed it, my friend.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks, Tim. Have a good evening.